Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be zeroing in on just one source, a review of the film A Real Pain. It's from Moviescramble, written by Mary Munoz.
That's right. And our mission really is to take this single review and sort of unpack it. We want to pull out the key insights it gives us about the film itself. You know, its themes, the characters, what the reviewer thought. Basically give you a really clear picture of what this film is about just based on this one piece.
Okay. And the film itself, written, directed by Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah, and he stars in it too, alongside Kieran Culkin.
Right. It's about these two cousins, David, that's Eisenberg, and Benji, who's Culkin. And they're traveling through Poland.
Because their grandmother passed away.
Exactly. And she was a Holocaust survivor, so that history hangs over the trip. They're visiting her old house, important historical sites.
That sounds intense.
It is. And the review actually kicks off with a quote from the film. It's the tour guide, James. He describes Poland's history with its Jewish communities as, let me get this right, fascinating, complex, at times tragic, but ultimately beautiful.
And right away, the reviewer says, hey, that description. It could just as easily be about the film itself.
Okay, that's a really strong framing device. So how does the review back that up? How does it argue the film fits that description?
Well, it dives straight into the relationship between the cousins, David and Benji. It says that's the absolute core. And it sets them up from the very first scene as, well, almost total opposites.
Right, it mentions the film opens in an airport lounge, and Benji is just kind of there, looking around, seems pretty relaxed, affable.
Affable, maybe a bit chaotic. Breezy music playing, the review notes.
Well, David is immediately painted as neurotic, obsessing over logistics.
Totally. Leaving these frantic voicemails for Benji. He's late, there's traffic. The reviewer sees this as a really smart way to instantly show their different personalities. And that contrast, that's what drives the whole movie.
Makes sense. And this difference carries over into how they deal with their grandmother's death, right? The shared grief.
Absolutely. The review mentions it brings up complicated feelings, which, you know, is probably an understatement. But yeah, they process those feelings in very different ways.
So let's talk about Benji first. The review seems pretty taken with Kieran Culkin's performance.
Oh, definitely. Calls it a tour de force. Mentions it's getting awards buzz already. Describes Benji as personable, maybe too personable, like invasively so. Prone to rants, always gesticulating.
Yeah, there's that line the reviewer uses, something like, Benji is crying out to be loved amongst all his performative normalcy. That really stuck with me.
That's a great line, yeah. It suggests his grief is sort of buried under all that energy, that carefully curated nonchalance.
And the review says he's meant to make you feel both endeared and kind of annoyed.
Exactly. And that Culkin just nails that balance. Effortlessly, it says.
Okay, so that's Benji. What about David, Eisenberg's character?
David's portrayed as wearing his anxiety, his social awkwardness, almost like a shield, a comfort blanket is the phrase used. He prefers to hang back, doesn't really mix with the tour group much.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of his energy goes into managing Benji or apologizing for whatever Benji just did.
So you've got this fundamental clash. Two very different people stuck together dealing with this heavy family history and their own personal grief at the same time.
Right. And what the review really praises is how Eisenberg's script handles that. It's not just one note. It manages rapid-fire exchanges with thoughtful pauses, emotional outbursts with devastating silence. It finds that balance.
And surprisingly, perhaps, given the subject matter grief, the Holocaust, the review stresses that there's actually humor in it.
Yes, definitely. It points out there's a lot of humor here, which feels important.
Does it give examples?
It does. There's apparently a rant Benji goes on a train about Jewish people being in first class, which gets this really dry comeback from another tourist. Sounds like sharp writing. And there are moments where the cousins just, you know, sneak off to smoke weed on rooftops, sharing memories of their grandmother. They're maybe funny or just very human. It's not all sorrow.
So it sounds like that complexity the reviewer mentioned at the start, tragic but beautiful, comes through in this mix of tones too.
Precisely. The review says the film is somehow quiet and restrained and also loud and clumsy about its hurt simultaneously.
That's quite a description. Now, the review highlights a couple of specific moments as being really powerful. Can we dig into those?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one is when the tour group gets to Majdanek, the former concentration camp.
Right.
And the reviewer says the whole mood just shifts instantly. Everything goes quiet. The camera apparently pulls way back, showing the huge, awful scale of the place, the inhumanity. But then, crucially, it zooms back in, focuses on the characters' faces as they get near the gas chambers. And their faces show this a complex sense of history and loss.
Wow. The review calls it a moment of stillness, unlike anything else in the film. Even mentions the sound cuts out completely for a bit.
Yeah, even the sound briefly cuts to nothing. Sounds incredibly impactful, using silence to convey that weight.
Definitely. And the second moment, the reviewer singles out a monologue.
Yes, David's monologue. It happens later, after, another incident where David has to smooth things over for Benji. And the tour group tries to be kind, saying things like Benji's just troubled but wants to be good.
And that sets David off.
Exactly. It triggers this really raw, honest outpouring from him about Benji's mental health struggles.
Okay.
He talks about the paradox of loving Benji, but also sometimes hating him, wanting to fix him, and even, confusingly, sometimes wanting to be more like him, despite everything.
That sounds incredibly vulnerable.
Totally. The review calls it one of the most poignant and honest moments in the whole film.
Yeah.
Because it taps into something really authentic about grieving and about loving someone who is, well, complicated.
Yeah.
Messy.
So putting it all together, this review depicts a film that tackles enormous themes: memory, generational trauma, loss, how you bounce back or don't.
Yeah, all the heavy stuff.
But it does it through this very specific human relationship with humor, deep emotion, and these really standout moments.
That's exactly the picture it paints. The reviewer wraps up by calling a real pain both uplifting and an emotional watch, which is quite a combination.
Uplifting. Interesting.
Yeah. They double down on Culkin being outstanding, but also give huge credit to Eisenberg's script, calling it beautiful for its balance and its honesty.
So it really circles back to that opening idea from the reviewer.
Absolutely. That the film, like the history it engages with, manages to be fascinating, complex, at times tragic, but ultimately beautiful.
And based on the review, it seems like that beauty isn't about ignoring the pain or the messiness.
No, not at all. It seems to emerge from grappling with it. Through the difficult journey itself, the complicated family stuff, the shared moments, the honesty like in David's monologue. That seems to be where the beauty lies, according to this review.
Okay, so the review ends on an interesting note. It points out the film finishes where it started, Benji, in an airport lounge.
Right. Bookends.
But the reviewer suggests that this time, Benji leaves with a clearer sense of direction. It's a subtle shift, maybe.
It is. And that leaves us, and you, with something to think about. Based on everything this review tells us about their journey, the places, the history, the arguments, the humor, the raw emotion. What parts of that experience might the reviewer believe contributed to this potential change in Benji? What could give him that clearer sense of direction by the end?
Something to definitely mull over after hearing about this review.